2. The party began pitching camp long before the sun would go down. Ainz took the wooden rods he was given and stood them up around the perimeter of their site. That said, they had to fit the cart inside, so it was fairly large, more than 20 yards across. Once he hammered the 4 posts into the dirt, he would string a black silk thread around them to make an enclosure. Then he would make a knot in the thread, pull it right near the opening to their tent, and hang up a big bell to finish it off. In other words, he was cordoning off their campsite and setting up a noisy alarm. Narborough stood behind him as he was knocking in the posts. Narborough was supposed to have something else to do. I guess it's fine if she finished that already. If that guy pissed her off again, I may have to have a word with him. Ainz had decided as he went to turn around, but then Narborough spoke in a dark voice, as if she was suppressing her rage. "Mr. Momon, you shouldn't have to do such menial tasks as these." Seeing her anger, Ainz sighed slightly. Then he looked around and lowered his voice. "Everyone is pitching in to set up camp. You think they would be okay with me just sitting around on my butt?"
"Didn't you show them your magnificent combat ability? Everyone has their strengths. This kind of work should be left to the weak."
"Don't be like that. Listen, we do need to stand out as powerful, but I don't want people to think we're arrogant. You need to keep an eye on your behavior, too." Narborough nodded her understanding, but it was plain that she wasn't convinced, only taking his order. On the one hand, he was happy that her overwhelming devotion to him could beat down her own dissatisfaction, but he wondered if that was really sustainable. Ainz was actually enjoying his stay in the outdoors. In the real world, it had been impossible, of course, but he hadn't been able to do this even in the fantasy world of Yggdrasil. So it was all new and surprising. It also reminded him of going on quests in Yggdrasil, even though it did take a little too long to get from place to place here. If instead of the Great Tomb of Nazarick, it had been just me who got transported here, I would probably just have traveled around without a care in the world. He was undead, so he didn't need food or drink. He didn't even need to breathe. He could climb the far-off mountains empty-handed and dive to the deepest ocean depths, too. He would have simply enjoyed all the unfamiliar scenery the world had to offer. But as long as his guildmates' precious creations were obeying him, he had to live up to their loyalty by acting as the ruler of the Great Tomb. Shaking off his memories, Ainz devoted himself to his task once more. Once all 4 posts were sunk deep enough, he strung the thread tightly around them and returned to the marquee tent. "Thanks." "Oh, no problem." Lecruit, who was inside, had addressed him without even looking up. It was perhaps lacking in courtesy, but it wasn't as if he were slacking off either. He'd been digging a hole and building an oven around it for a while. Ninya was walking the perimeter chanting some spell. Alarm was a spell one could cast as a precaution. He said it couldn't cover a very large area, but was worth using just in case. Ainz had squinted. This was magic that hadn't existed in Yggdrasil. Collecting spells that didn't exist in Yggdrasil was one of the jobs he'd given the others, but as a caster, unfamiliar magic awakened his greed. The magic Ninya used was, like Ainz's, arcane type. The spells even looked just like the ones in Yggdrasil. Ainz had been doing something only characters with a racial skill Black Wisdom could do to increase the number of spells he could acquire. If I perform a sacrifice ritual, could I get spells that weren't in Yggdrasil? Or is there another way? There are so many things I don't know. Ninya had realized Ainz was staring, and although he had warmed up a little since they had first met, he still wore a forced smile when he came over. "You don't need to watch it so closely. It's not such an interesting spell, is it?" "I'm extremely curious about magic, so I take a great deal of interest in what you do, Ninya."
"Really? But Nabe is a way better caster than me."
"But you can use spells she can't."
Ainz saw Narborough lower her head slightly. He could tell from the corner of his eye that she was more jealous than embarrassed.
"I'd like to be able to use magic like you can."
You want to learn magic even though you're that good with a sword? You're a hard worker, huh, Momon? Although I suppose that attitude makes you a model adventurer.
Lecruit chimed in without looking up from the oven he was building. Magic isn't something you can just learn overnight. First, you gotta get this connection to the world thing. But the only ones who can do that easily are the ones who have a natural knack for it. I heard that if you don't, all you can do is study little by little till you get the feel. Ninya's smile vanished and was replaced by a serious expression.
Momon, I think you have the aptitude. I get the feeling you're different from normal people. There's something about you that just doesn't exist among humans.
Ainz's non-existent heart skipped a beat. It sounded almost like Ninya had vaguely realized he was an undead. He was using illusions and anti-intelligence magic, but it was plenty possible that unfamiliar spells or special abilities could strip off his mask. He cautiously asked, "Oh? I know I'm strong, but I don't think it's to a degree that is non-existent among humans. I showed you my face, right?"
It's not a question of looks. More just that amount of power is not human. You were killing ogres in one hit. I guess men are about power, not looks, huh? I mean, you got a babe like Nabe with you.
Considering Lecruit's remarks with a level head, it seemed like the illusionary face he'd created was being called ugly, and when he thought about the people he had met so far, he had to agree. There's too much beauty in this world. You can look at anybody in the street and they have nice, regular features. I used to consider my face worthy of a supporting role, but now I wonder if I'd even make the bill.
Faces aside, Lecruit is right. The ones they call heroes are on another level from ordinary humans. That really sunk in for me today.
I don't think I'm a hero, though. I'm not fishing for compliments here. Ainz answered Ninya, pretending to be flustered while suppressing his sigh of relief.
Would you like to come meet the person who taught me? My teacher has the talent of being able to tell how much natural aptitude someone has. For arcane magic, it's apparently even possible to know what tier.
Actually, there's something I've been wondering. Isn't that the same talent that the Empire's head wizard has?
Yes, it's the same one.
Ainz couldn't let this chance pass. He could get more info if he pressed. What kind of ability is it, exactly?
The way my teacher explains it, every caster has a magic aura. The more powerful they are, the bigger the aura. My teacher has the power to see those auras.
Ainz's voice was about to go too deep, but he controlled himself to reply in a normal range.
My teacher collects kids with good auras and trains them.
Ninya continued to say that he had been found in just that way. Ainz made the appropriate feedback noises while inwardly cursing that there was such a talent. It could mean trouble. So, if I think I'd like to use magic, what should I do first?
Maybe finding a proper teacher is a good place to start.
So, maybe I could be your disciple?
I think it'd be better to find someone stronger than me. But the thing is, in the kingdom, almost all the schools are private. And if you're not affiliated with any of the magic-related guilds, you can't get in. And the people who do get in are usually kids, because their brains are still malleable. To get in at your age, you'd have to have someone pretty important pulling strings for you. In comparison, the Empire has a solid magic academy, and the theocracy also offers some fairly high-level education. In faith magic, of course.
Aha! Is it pretty easy to get into the Empire's magic academy?
It'd probably be pretty hard, actually. The academy is a facility maintained by state policy, so for a non-national...
I see.
And about you being my disciple, my apologies. But I have something I want to do, so I don't have time to spend on that.
Ninya's face darkened, and there was something sinister and threatening in his expression. A thinly veiled hostility.
Guess I should steer clear of that subject. Doesn't seem like there is any benefit to pressing him anyway.
Just as Ainz made that decision, Recruit casually interrupted.
Hey, sorry to bug you in the middle of your chat, but food's almost ready. Could you go get the other 3?
I'll go, Momon.
Aw, you're leaving, Nabe? Wouldn't you rather make this meal the fruit of our love? Come cook with me. Drop dead, centipede. Or do you want me to force feed you boiling oil so you can't talk any more nonsense?
Would you give it a rest, Nabe? I'm going with you.
Sir, understood.
Ainz thanked Ninya before leaving the tent and walking over to where 2 of the others were sitting on the ground, working a little ways away. Peter and Dine were completely absorbed in the inspection of the weapons they had used earlier. They applied oil to the swords so they wouldn't rust, and checked all the weapons carefully to make sure they hadn't bent. There was fresh damage to their armor, and the swords had dings from where they had clashed with the goblins' weapons. These makeshift repairs were standard, considering that one's life could depend on them. They were focusing so hard, Ainz almost didn't want to interrupt. After telling those 2 dinner was ready, they let Inferia, who was tending to the horses a little ways away, know as well. The sun was just about to disappear below the horizon. Its evening rays had dyed the sky crimson when dinner began. Stew flavored with smoke and salted meat was ladled into everyone's bowl. That, plus crusty bread and dried figs, along with walnuts and other nuts, made up the night's meal. Ainz looked down at the salty-seeming soup in his bowl. He couldn't feel the heat of it through his gauntlets, but considering everyone was eating without waiting for it to cool, it must have been just the right temperature. Now what? Ainz was undead with a body that couldn't eat or drink. He could create illusions to make it look like he had a body, but as long as he was made of bones and had a bottomless mouth, any soup he put in would spill right out. There was no way he could let them see that. Unfamiliar food in an unfamiliar land. Despite how simple everything was, Ainz thought it a shame that he couldn't eat any. He had pretty much lost the desire for food entirely, but sure enough, when a bunch of tasty-looking dishes were laid out, his curiosity was piqued. He was rather frustrated that he couldn't eat. It was the first time since coming to this world that he regretted being in a new body.
Oh, is there something you don't like in it?
Recruit asked, since Ainz wasn't touching his food. No, it's not that. There's a specific reason.
Oh yeah? Okay then. Don't feel like you have to force yourself to eat it. Actually, it's mealtime and all. What about taking off that helmet?
It's against my religion. There is a rule that one must not eat in a party of 4 or more on a day one has taken a life.
Huh? You believe in some strange stuff, Momon. But I guess the world is a big place. I can't believe there's a teaching about how many people you can eat with on a day you kill something. Once they found out it was something to do with religion, everyone's suspicious looks softened. I suppose religion has the potential to cause trouble in this world, too. Momon prayed to his non-existent god to thank him for helping him out of that situation, and then asked Peter a question to change the subject. So, you guys are called the Swords of Darkness, but none of you have terribly dark-looking swords. For his main weapon, Peter had a not terribly magical longsword, Recruit had a bow, Dine had a mace, and Ninya had a staff. Nobody had a black or dark-colored sword. Peter's sword and Recruit's sub-weapon, a short sword, were close in shape, but were nowhere near the right color. By mixing special powder into the metal, it was possible to change a sword's color, so it would be easy enough to make a sword look dark. It was actually strange that none of them had one. Oh, that. An awkward smile played across Recruit's face, like he'd been reminded of some past embarrassment. Ninya's face was turning a shade of red, distinctly different from the reflected light of the fire. That's what Ninya wanted. Please stop. I was young and stupid.
You have nothing to be ashamed of. It's important to dream big.
Dine, would you give me a break? Seriously. The other Swords of Darkness chuckled warmly at him, and Ninya looked like he was about to start writhing from the awkwardness of it all. The name seemed to have some special meaning for the group.
We're named after 4 swords that belonged to one of the 13 heroes a long time ago,
Peter declared, grinning from ear to ear. He didn't seem like he was going to add anything else. That's great, but I have no idea what you're talking about. I know the 13 heroes were super powerful heroes who destroyed evil spirits that were terrorizing the land 200 years ago. But I don't know who they all were and what kind of gear they had. Is that bad? Or should I just say, huh? While Ainz was wavering, Narborough spoke up from beside him. Who were they? Nice! Ainz struck a victory pose in his head, but the Swords of Darkness seemed unsettled. The reality of someone not knowing magical weapons so famous they had named their whole team after them must have been a shock. You haven't heard of them, Nabe? Well, I guess you wouldn't have. Some people think of the 13 heroes as evil, or say they had demon blood. They were deliberately left out of the sagas, and people say the powers they had were insane.
The Swords of Darkness are 4 swords that belong to one of the heroes, called the Black Knight. Demonic Sword, Kilinirum, that gives off dark energy. Canker Sword, Karoktorvare, that is said to inflict wounds that never heal. Death Sword, Sapphise, that takes your life if it so much as scratches you. And Evil Sword, Humuris, the special ability of which is unclear.
Narborough seemed to have lost interest, and everyone smiled, embarrassed. But Ainz cocked his head a bit. He had heard of those special abilities somewhere before. After thinking about it, a vampire came to mind. Shaltir Bloodfallen had a class called Cursed Knight that had skills just like that. The Cursed Knight was a priest knight sullied with a curse, and one of the more powerful classes in Yggdrasil. It was also heavily penalized, so it wasn't very popular. Among the skills it could acquire were the ability to give off a wave of darkness, inflict wounds that couldn't be cured except with the strongest healing magic, and cast an insta-death curse. Ainz narrowed his illusionary eyes. It couldn't be a coincidence. It was possible that the Swords of Darkness were swords with effects that happened to match Cursed Knight skills, but there seemed to be a bigger chance that the hero who had wielded them was a Cursed Knight. To meet the minimum requirements to be a Cursed Knight, one needed a cumulative class level of at least 60, which meant that this Black Knight person had to be at least level 60. No, to have all those skills, he'd have to be at least 70. That would mean that the evil spirits he fought must have been about the same level, but Nigun had been shouting about how the angel he'd summoned, the Dominion Authority, had defeated an evil spirit like it was some big deal, so Ainz wasn't sure how the power balance worked. If he went by the information he'd collected thus far, it made the most sense to assume that evil spirits came at all kinds of power levels, but he wouldn't know the truth unless he either got his hands on those swords or met the hero. While Ainz was lost in thought, the party's conversation had continued. With a start, he turned his attention back to that. It would be a waste to miss the opportunity to get more information. Ultimate goal is to find them. There are a lot of weapons that are said to be legends, but these we know for sure exist. Well, I guess we don't know if they still exist, but... Oh, I know of one person who has a Sword of Darkness. Inferior casually dropped a bomb, and they all turned to face him as if he'd physically yanked them. Who? Whoa, are you serious? So there's only 3 left?
Now there won't be enough to go around.
Inferior responded timidly. It's the leader of that group of adventurers called the Blue Roses.
Ugh, those guys? They're adamantite. I guess we should just give up then. Indeed, there are still 3 left, so let's get strong enough to get all of those. Yeah, if one is real, the others must be too. I hope they're hidden somewhere and no one will find them before we do.
Ninya, write that in your journal so we won't forget. I will. But actually, my journal is personal, so couldn't you write it down yourself?
It's good to make a physical record for posterity. I don't think that's the issue, Dine. Anyway, we have that other thing already. Other thing? This, Momon. Peter took a dagger with 4 small jewels inlaid in its handle out of his breast pocket and drew it. The blade was black. The idea is to have this as our symbol until we get the real ones.
What if we called ourselves Blades of Darkness instead of Swords of Darkness? Then there's no real or fake, and this thing can symbolize us properly.
Huh. For once, Lacroute, you have a point.
The Swords of Darkness all laughed together like the group of good friends they were. Even Ainz smiled. They must have felt the same way toward that dagger as he did toward the staff that symbolized his guild. Soon the conversation was of the idle sort suitable to mealtime. Since there were more of the Swords of Darkness, they took the lead and skillfully bounced topics off of Ainz, Narberl, and Inferia. Ainz participated, but he still felt some kind of wall between him and the swords. He also felt like he was out of step because he always had to speak vaguely in order to conceal how little he knew about the world. Then he ended up talking less. It was a vicious circle. Anytime someone asked Narberl something, she would answer in a way that cut off all further discussion, so they gradually stopped bothering. Inferia was doing fine. There was the fact that he was a human who actually lived in this world, but Ainz felt the boy had social skills far superior to his own as well. He always found ingenious ways to keep the conversation moving. He had that knack for reading the mood. Who cares? I have my old friends. Ainz sulked while he watched the harmonious bunch chat in the glow of the fire. Perhaps it was only natural for people who risked their lives together, but they really did get along well. Inferia also looked on, wishing he could share in such a friendship. Ainz thought of his old friends and got so jealous he loudly ground his teeth beneath his helmet. It used to be like this before for me, too.
You all get along so well. Is that normal for adventurer teams? I think so. Probably because we trust one another with our lives. It's dangerous to adventure with people if you don't know what they're thinking or can't tell what they'll do. So before you know it, you're all suddenly getting along.
Oh yeah, and we don't have any girls on our team. I heard if you do, you end up fighting. Peter and the others nodded in agreement.
Yeah, that must be part of it. It's amazing how different it feels when everyone's aims are aligned.
Huh? Did you used to have a team too, Momon?
Inferia's curiosity put Ainz at a loss for words, but he realized there was no need to tiptoe around this topic. Well, they weren't adventurers, per se, but... It was no wonder, as he remembered his old friends, that his voice started to sound a bit heavy and gloomy. Becoming an undead didn't stop all of his mental processes, and his strongest emotions were about those friends. Sensing something in his reply, no one pushed further. A curtain of silence fell. It was so quiet it was as if there was no one else in the world. Ainz looked up at the stars that had come out at some point to twinkle. Back when I was weak, the one who saved me was a pure white holy knight with a sword and a shield. Under his wing, I made 4 more friends. Then we picked up 3 more weaklings, like I had been, for a total of 9. That was my first team.
Wow. Someone's impressed voice sounded among the crackling sparks, but Ainz didn't care who it was. He was reminiscing about the forerunner to Ainz ul Gon, the first 9.
They were wonderful comrades. A holy knight, a katana wielder, a priest, a thief, a double-wielding thief, a sorcerer, a cook, and a blacksmith. They were the greatest friends one could hope for. I've been on many adventures since that time, but I'll never forget those days.
It was thanks to them that he knew what a friend was. Right at the moment he was despairing about being treated so badly even inside the world of Yggdrasil, those wonderful people reached out to him. And as their membership increased, the fun times continued. That was why Ainz was willing to give up everything, to trample anything else underfoot, if he could protect and show off his precious guild. It meant the world to him. I hope someday you can make such great friends again.
That day will never come, snapped Ainz, annoyed by Ninya's consolatory words.
His voice contained a surprising amount of hostility. Ainz stood, equally stunned himself.
Excuse me. I'm going to go eat over there.
I'll go with you.
Really? Well, I guess if it's your religion.
Peter responded in a disappointed voice, but didn't try too hard to make them stay. Ainz saw that Ninya's face was gloomy, but he didn't have the will to say anything, despite the fact that a simple, "It's fine," would have been enough. The two of them had gone to a corner of the corded-off area, and it seemed like they were beginning to eat. When someone leaves a group, the conversation sometimes turned to the subject of that same person. And that day, the person on everyone's lips had just left. It was only natural that the conversation should move in his direction. Just as the discussion was interrupted and silence had fallen, the fire popped loudly and sparks rose into the sky. Following the sparks with his eyes, Ninya mumbled, I suppose I said something wrong.
Indeed, something must have happened.
Dine nodded gravely, and Peter continued.
I wonder if they got wiped out. People who've lost all their friends at once tend to have that sense about them. That'd be really hard. Even in a world where lives are taken and lost every day, losing your friends must be...
Right, Recruit. I should have thought harder about what I was saying.
You can't reverse what you said. All you can do is give the person something to write over the top of it with.
Ninya said he would, but his face was cheerless. Then he mumbled, I know how awful it is to lose someone, so why didn't I realize? And no one said anything in reply. In the silence, a log popped and more sparks rose. To change the topic to something less heavy, Inferior cautiously began to speak. Momon sure was amazing in the fight today. Peter jumped on the topic as if he'd been waiting for it. Yeah, I had no idea he was that strong. Cutting an ogre in half with one swing. Seriously, though. Even I think it's amazing to kill an ogre in one hit. But about how impressive would you say it is that he cut it in half? Inferia asked, and the Swords of Darkness all looked at one another. Inferia, famous as a talent holder, was also an excellent caster. He had the potential to be a great success in the future, but it was hard for him to grasp how powerful Ainz was when he didn't have other warriors around for comparison. Peter realized that and chose his words carefully to explain so Inferia could understand.
Usually, you use a large sword's weight to cut, but he made a severing slice. Achieving that with the large sword in one hand against a massive muscle like that ogre would be extremely difficult. Well, there are some exceptions, but...
Inferia seemed impressed and hummed, but Peter saw that he wasn't quite impressed enough, so he brought someone up for comparison.
Honestly, I think he's on the level of the captain of the Royal Selects.
Inferia's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He finally understood quite well how powerful the Swords of Darkness thought Momon was. So you mean he's an adamantite rank adventurer? The strongest kind? A living legend? He's on par with one of the most elite humans there is?
Yes, Peter answered simply with a nod, and when Inferia looked at the other party members, they all nodded as well. He was dumbstruck. A plate made of adamantite, a rare magic metal known for being the hardest, signified an adventurer at the peak of the profession. Naturally, there were very few who made it that far. The kingdom and the empire had 2 teams each. That was it. Their power was at the furthest end of human potential. In other words, they were heroic. And Momon was their equal.
That's amazing.
The whisperer expressed a deep admiration.
When I first met Momon and saw he was a copperplate, I saw the fancy armor he was wearing and felt jealous. But now that I've seen that he has the skills to match, I can only accept that it makes sense. His armor is appropriate for his skills. Boy, I wish I were that strong.
Peter wore banded armor, which offered less defense than full plate armor. He hadn't selected it by choice. It was just the best protection his limited budget afforded him.
What, Peter? You'll be able to buy even fancier full plate armor soon enough. That's right. And if you admire his strength, then all you have to do is make that your goal and put in the work. You should probably be grateful that you had the opportunity to witness such an inspiration. Yeah, what Ninya said. You gotta try to work towards Momon's level. We'll support you, and we'll find our own role models, too.
That's right. Just take your time. The way he looked, he's been training far longer than you.
Inferia reacted to what Dine had said. You've seen beneath Momon's helmet?
Ainz hadn't taken it off a single time since meeting Inferia. He had it on through all their meals. It was unclear how he even drank anything. Yes, we have. He was utterly normal. Just not from around here. He had the same black hair and eyes as Nabe.
I see. Did he mention what country he's from?
The Swords of Darkness all looked at one another. Suddenly, Inferia was quite engaged in the conversation.
No, he didn't say. Oh, I was just wondering because if he's from a far-off country, maybe they have different kinds of potions there or something. Apothecary stuff.
Ah, right. It does seem like he came from the same place as Nabe, but they don't look alike at all. You wouldn't be able to call him good-looking even as flattery, but I guess she must be into that. Looks don't matter so much when you're that strong. He's probably got any number of women coming after him. Strong men were attractive. That is to say, given the existence of monsters, and humans being one of the inferior races, there were many women whose instincts caused them to be attracted very strongly to powerful men.
This love of mine is doomed then. No matter how you look at it, I'm pretty sure it was doomed from the get-go, Ninya said, laughing as he recalled Nabe's reactions to Lacrout's advances. Come on, man. For now, I'm just going to try and keep pushing. That's what it takes. And I mean, she's super gorgeous. If I can just get her to return even a tiny fraction of my love, I'll be able to count up myself among the winners in life.
She is extremely beautiful, but...
Dine was half through his sentence, wearing an austere expression, when he noticed the sour look on Inferia's face.
Is something wrong, Inferia?
Oh, nah, it's not a big deal. Ninya's and Lacrout's faces broke into indecent grins. You don't have a thing for Nabe, do you? No! Inferia quickly replied, practically shouting. Peter sensed that there was something they shouldn't discuss behind that overreaction.
Lacrout, don't be rude. Think a little before opening your mouth.
Lacrout apologized sincerely.
Inferia didn't seem to know how to act in response.
No, it's not that. I'm just a little anxious. Do you think Momon is really that popular with women?
Well, I don't know about looks-wise, but with that strength, there's a good chance. And with that armor and those swords, he looks rich, too.
Ah.
Inferia was looking slightly glummer. Peter addressed him like an attentive big brother would, looking out for his little bro. Did something happen? Inferia opened and closed his mouth several times. Nobody intervened. There was no reason to force him to say something he didn't want to say. But finally, Inferia made up his mind and opened his guarded mouth.
There's someone in Kugane who... I'd be upset if she fell for Momon.
Reading between the lines, the Swords of Darkness all smiled warmly. Okay, little guy, let your big bro show you how it's done. Peter stabbed the recruit with a fist, and there was a strange slumping sound. Keeping only the corners of their eyes on the passed-out ranger, everyone had something to say to Inferia, who was still in shock. In the glow of the fire, he broke into a smile. Meanwhile, a forehead was pierced clear through the steel helmet protecting it. The body shuddered once and then collapsed to the ground like a marionette whose strings had been cut. The clatter of its metal armor echoed in the darkness. Another man wanted to hope that someone might hear the racket and come running, but no one was crazy enough to come to a neighborhood of Arantel even the slum dwellers had abandoned. That's why they were meeting their requester here in the first place. He glared at the woman in front of him, but couldn't disguise that it was just a brave front. After watching her kill his 3 comrades in quick succession, his spirit was broken. The woman whipped the stiletto she'd used to kill the others, splattering the ground with blood and restoring the blade's cold gleam.
Looks like you're the only one left.
She revealed all her teeth in a big, carnivorous smile.
Why are you doing this?
He knew it was a stupid thing to ask, but this was all out of the blue to him. The men were Adventurer Guild dropouts known simply as workers, sometimes also called dusk workers. They would take on jobs that were borderline criminal or even actual crimes. So while there wasn't a total lack of reasons people would have something against them, they hadn't even done any jobs in this city yet, and they'd had no recollection of ever meeting this woman.
Why am I doing this? Oh, I just thought I'd like to have you.
He blinked a few times in confusion and asked, What do you mean?
The grandson of that famous apothecary is out, so I need someone to keep watch and tell me when he gets back. You think I want to do a pain-in-the-ass job like that myself?
Why not just make that as a request, then? Wasn't that the point? They were workers who would take on illegal jobs, so he had no idea why this woman had to kill him.
No. You might betray me.
We don't betray anybody as long as we get paid.
Oh, well then let's say this. I adore killing people. It's my love, my passion.
She laughed and added,
Oh, and torture too.
The man's face screwed up in disbelief at this thing on which common sense had no effect. What the hell? Why are you so insane?
Why?
The woman's expression suddenly changed, along with the tone of her voice. Her nonsensical attitude of just a moment before vanished.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe because it used to be my job to kill people. Or because I was always compared to my brilliant big brother. Or because our parents gave all their love to him. Or because I got abused when I was weak. Or because my friend died right in front of me. Or because I screwed up, got caught, and was tortured for days. Red-hot choke pears really hurt, you know.
There was something childish about her then, but a moment later the adult had returned, grinning.
Just kidding. Those were all lies, lies, lies. None of that ever happened to me. But who cares anyway? Even if you knew my past, it wouldn't change anything. Just a lot of junk happened, and here I am. But man, I'm really glad Kaj did the research for me. And I could contact you right away. It would have taken forever if I had to start from finding someone to work with.
The woman let go of her stiletto. Pulled by gravity, the knife's tip sank into the earth far enough that it didn't fall over. That abnormal sharpness implied that it was made of not steel, but some other metal.
It's orichalcum. More specifically, orichalcum-coated mithril. That's not so common, you know.
The rareness of the weapon spoke to her strength. In other words, the man realized he didn't stand a chance.
Okay, next. If I give you too big of an injury, it won't be any use to me. If only Kaj could use his faith magic, so no matter how much I hurt you, we could heal you back up. I'd be able to torture you forever. Wouldn't that be great?
Chattering on about such horrible things, the woman took out another stiletto from under her robe.
This should work. Sorry if I miss.
The woman apologized, sticking out her tongue. Superficially, she was cute, but her true tainted nature was showing. The man turned and started to run. Behind him, the woman yelped in what sounded like feigned surprise. He didn't stop to pay attention, just ran desperately through the darkness, employing the sense of direction he was so proud of. But he heard a jangling from behind him in the woman's icy voice, sounding like she wasn't even breaking a sweat.
Too slow!
And then a white-hot pain shot through his shoulder. As he realized he'd been stabbed with the stiletto, a haze washed over his brain. Mind control! The man fought frantically, but the haze hanging over his consciousness was stronger. After a short time, he heard the voice of his new friend behind him.
Hey, are you all right? The wound isn't too deep, is it?
No, I'm fine. He turned around to smile at his friend.
Oh, good.
The girl smiled a horrifying grin back at him.